Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. We're here today on Twitch, which was a little bit unexpected. We're having technical difficulties, but fortunately, we have lots and lots of options. If you all are here and can hear me, please let me know. Just type a little something in the chat box. That way we know everything is functioning. And it looks like lots of people are saying we are here, so that is good. I see some regulars. We have Gary Hotmail. Long time no see, Gary Hotmail. We see Chip Glass. We see lots and lots of the regulars. So I'm glad that you all are here. And today we're going to be discussing how to play from the small blind against a loose, aggressive player. This is a situation that gave me plenty of trouble as a young poker player and even as a well-experienced player, because when you're out of position, a lot of your tools are taken away from you, right? You don't have position, and position is very important for many reasons, but when you're out of position, especially against someone who's aggressive, they're going to be able to just lean on you, right? They're going to be able to play aggressively. They're going to be able to call you down easily. It doesn't result in good things happening for you. So, what can you do about it? Well, that's what we are going to be talking about today. Now, make sure you stay till the end of this webinar, because I'm actually going to give you whichever one of these free ebooks you would like. A lot of people say, well, this may not be for me because I only play tournaments or I only play cash games. But you have to realize this topic is for everyone, and give you a little incentive to stick around and watch. We're going to be giving you one of these two ebooks of your choice. I will let you know how to do that at the end of this webinar. So I do realize some of you may not know me. I'm Jonathan Little. I have cashed for about $6.8 million in live tournaments. I am the author of 14 best-selling poker books, including 2 of those you just saw. I commentate on many poker shows, including the World Series of Poker, World Poker Tour, for Poker Stars, Party Poker, etc., etc. And I'm the head coach of PokerCoaching.com. So in this webinar, we are going to be discussing this very specific situation. And if you have any questions pertaining to this while we are here, please feel free to type them in the chat box and I will do my best to answer them. And if you have any questions not relating to what we're discussing right now, I'm happy to answer that later in a question and answer session. So we're going to be here for a little while, maybe a little bit more than an hour. And I want to make sure that you learn how to play this very difficult spot that occurs very, very frequently. A lot of people like to discuss the very rare corner cases that come up every once in a while, but it's really important that you understand how to play common situations. So in this scenario, action folds to a reasonably loose, aggressive player in the cutoff who raises to 2.5 big blinds out of his 50 big blind effective stack. Pretty normal, right? Cutoff raises. We're in the small blind. And in this situation, we know the player in the big blind plays well. Okay? Define your pre-flop strategy with each part of your range, with each hand that you would potentially play. Whenever I send out an email with a question like this, people say, well, what is your hand? I don't know how are you supposed to know what to do? You don't know what 2 cards you have. But you have to understand, what really matters is how do you play your entire range. Now, before we can even discuss which range we play, we have a few questions we need to ask, right? First, do we want to mostly 3-bet or call? I mean, this really is the main question that we have. And there are a few questions that you can ask to help determine this, right? So first, how will your opponent play from in position? Will your opponent play well, or will they play poorly, right? Will he or she do anything incorrectly, right? Will they, let's say, continuation bet too often? Let's say we know the opponent's going to continuation bet too often. What can we do? Well, we can call pre-flop and then check raise on a lot of flops because they're going to be continuation betting way too wide. What if they check behind too often, right? Let's say they call, or you can call pre-flop, and then if they check behind on the flop, you can then bet the turn and pick up the pot a lot of the time. So you want to be asking, what does my opponent do incorrectly? And if the answer is something very specific that you can take advantage of, then calling becomes quite a strong option if you know they're going to respond poorly. Basically, if they play poorly after the flop, then calling becomes very, very good. If they're going to fold too often pre-flop to a 3-bet, well then that becomes a very, very strong play, right? 3-betting becomes a very strong play. Okay. All right, next thing you want to ask is who is in the big blind, right? If the player in the big blind plays very well, what do you want to happen? Take a second, think about it. Type it in the chat box, let me know what you think. If the player in the big blind plays well, what do we want? Do we want that player in or out? Well, you want that player out, right? So if you want the player in the big blind out, what do? You 3-bet more, right? And if the player in the big blind is really good, you want to be 3-betting a ton, perhaps your entire range. What if the opponent, the initial raiser, folds too often to 3-bets? Well, you also want to be 3-betting a ton. What if instead the player in the big blind is loose, splashy, generally bad? Well, in that scenario, you want to be calling a ton. So you always want to ask, what situation do I want to be in? And if the situation you want to be in is being out of position in a multi-way pot, well then calling will lead to that. If you want to be heads up as the aggressor in a 3-bet pot, 3-betting is the play that will accomplish that. So let's take a look at 2 strategies that are viable depending on the situation you're in. The first is the 3-betting strategy, I'll call it. And take a look at this range here. You see we are 3-betting for value with the hands in blue. These are hands that we are 3-betting and not folding if we get 4-bet. Okay, we are playing for all of our money with these hands. May seem a little bit loose to 3-bet with king, queen offsuit and get it all in. Maybe it is. If that's the case, maybe that becomes a calling hand, right? We're also 3-betting the hands in green as a bluff. So in this scenario, remember, let's go back to the initial question. The initial raiser makes it 2.5 big blinds from the cutoff, and now we are in the small blind. What do? We're 3-betting all these hands in blue and green. And this may look very aggressive, right? And in reality, you can have something like a ratio of 2 bluffs to every 1 value bet. So here we have 31% bluffs. That means we could have 62% bluffs. We have 31% value, 62% bluff. So we're actually a little bit below that. Given we are a little bit shallow in this hand, you do want to be tilted a little bit more towards value. So this is fine. This is on the aggressive side, right? So in this scenario, that is the play. What are the hands in red? The hands in red are the calling hands. These are hands that you don't mind calling because if you call and the big blind calls, that's perfectly fine, right? If you call in this scenario with Jack 10 suited and the big blind calls, it's not really the end of the world. Same thing for all these hands in red. So in this scenario, this is a very strong strategy that you should use against most good raisers and when the player in the big blind is good. Now, I know a lot of people are going to look at this and say, oh my gosh, this is way too aggressive for me. But this is what you need to do if you want to succeed at poker. You have to be willing to get in there and to play aggressively. So this is what you need to do. And so what's going to happen a lot of the time when you re-raise with this range is the initial raiser is just going to fold. Whenever the initial raiser makes it 2.5 big blinds out of their 50 big blind stack, you need to make it something like 8 or 9 big blinds. That's rather large, right? I realize it's rather large, but it's large because you want to make your opponent fold with the majority of their range, and you realize your range is tilted towards bluffs, right? We have way more bluffs than value bets, so we don't really care if the opponent folds, right? Of course, we are going to have aces, kings, queens, jacks sometimes. And if your opponents are really, really bad, you may want to use a different size with your hands in blue compared to your hands in green. But I'm presuming the opponents are decently good, so we don't really care if they fold in general. So this is a strategy that you should very often use, especially if your opponents all play well. Okay? Now, what if your opponents play poorly? Here's an alternative strategy. Now, we're going to 3-bet the hands in blue for value. Again, these are just the best hands we can happily get all in with. We're going to call with all the hands in red. You see it's a much wider range. And we're also going to 3-bet with some hands as a bluff. So if the big blind is particularly bad, especially in a loose and passive manner, you should definitely call with a much wider range of playable hands. That's going to work out way better for you. If the big blind will rarely fold to a 3-bet, you should also call with a wider range, right? And 3-bet with a range that is more tilted towards value, right? So in this scenario, if you know your opponent's not going to fold very often, you don't want to necessarily 3-bet with a lot of bluffs. And if you're 3-betting with fewer bluffs, you should also 3-bet with fewer value hands. So this is a strategy you'll very often want to use in small stakes games where you're against relatively loose raisers who are very call happy, right? They just don't fold very often. And even now, you may want to take out some of these hands in green. And to be fair, if your opponent's just a really terrible calling station, like they're just going to call with all sorts of garbage, well then you can 3-bet stuff like ace-9 suited, king-jack suited, queen-jack suited, king-queen offsuit, ace-jack offsuit. You can 3-bet all of those hands purely for value because in that situation, they are going to end up calling with a wide range of hands that you dominate, right? Mr. Insane says, when the villain is bad, we can have a 1-to-1 ratio of value to bluffs. Now, listen, it depends on how bad they are and in what way they are bad, right? Let's say, well, like I just said, say they're going to call literally every time. Say they open with the 8-5 suited and they're going to call your 3-bet. You don't really need to be 3-betting 10-9 offsuit, right? You'd much rather have just good, strong, big cards. So if your opponent is actually terrible, and they're just going to raise with all sorts of garbage and only 4-bet with aces and kings and then call with everything else, then you want to 3-bet just a very strong linear range. Let me actually see if I can pull this up and show you what I'm referring to. We'll make up a range on the fly if the internet cooperates. Let's see. I'm opening it up the... Where is it? Give me just a second. I'm using it on the other computer. So here we have it. Here's the range analyzer. Let's make sure this is in the proper window. Okay, this looks about right. Make it a little bit bigger. So in this scenario, we would have call, 3-bet for value, 3-bet as a bluff. So if the opponent is a super calling station, right? We want to 3-bet with a range that's something like this for value, right? Because we know our opponent's going to call us with all sorts of worse hands, right? We 3-bet just straight up with the best hands, nothing fancy, right? And then we call with everything else that's getting a decent price to call against a range that should be a little bit too wide. So it'll end up being a range like this. And you may ask, don't you want to have some bluffs? Well, no, you don't really need very many bluffs. Why don't you need any bluffs? Because your opponent's going to call you every time. If you know your opponent is literally that bad, then you don't want to be bluffing. You just want to be straight up 3-betting for value. And the question is, how wide can the value range go? I mean, it depends on how wide your opponent's opening and then calling, right? Like if they're going to open 8-5 suited and call your 3-bet every time, then you can 3-bet even wider than what I have here. Maybe something like this. I mean, this is certainly reasonable. This is an incredibly exploitative strategy. You were trying to definitely exploit a big mistake in your opponent's range, but if this is what they're going to do, this is fine. Is this tool free? Yes, this is the range analyzer. You can get access to this at floattheturn.com / well, just go to floattheturn.com, go to tools, scroll down to range analyzer, and there it is. This is what we use actually in all of the homework challenges at pokercoaching.com. Every month, I present a question very similar to this one where I ask the students to tell me their strategies, and then I go through and personally answer or review all of their answers so that they get real-time feedback from me and learn how to improve their game. Let's see. In the 3-bet strategy, what do the calling hands do if the big blind 3-bets? Let's go back to that. Let's say we use this strategy. We're only calling with these best hands. What do we do if that opponent 3-bets? Well, the suited hands can very easily still call a lot of the time. They're going to flop very well, right? And then the offsuit hands can either fold or 4-bet, but usually just fold. You may say, well, if this is your range, this is only your range, doesn't that make you really exploitable because the big blind should be should be or could squeeze a ton. They could re-raise a ton. That is true. They could, but they're not going to. Why are they not going to? Because remember, the initial raiser is very good in this example, right? So if the initial raiser is good, the initial raiser knows that they are responsible for defending a large portion of the time whenever they raise and I call. So if they 3-bet from out of position, yes, we're going to fold a lot, but also the initial raiser is going to defend often enough to where they can't just squeeze with all sorts of garbage. And to be fair, if you realize they are squeezing with all sorts of garbage, well then you can call with all these hands or 4-bet with all of these hands, right? Because remember, we're only playing 50 big blinds deep. If it goes raise to 2.5 big blinds and you call, then they make it, what, 11 or 12? 13? Well, now you can just rip it all in on them. And if you know they're bluffing too much, you're going to have a ton of fold equity. So don't look at these scenarios and think we are incredibly exploitable, because if the opponent is out of line, we're just going to demolish them. Let's see. Would you tighten up your range if a loose aggressive player is likely to 4-bet? Yes, you should have fewer bluffs if you're more likely to get 4-bets. Just in general, that is what you should do, right? We mentioned this 2-to-1 bluff ratios. That only pre-floppers are true on the other situations. This is kind of beyond the scope of this webinar, but pre-flop you can have roughly a 2-to-1 ratio bluffs to value bets. Same thing on the flop, 2-to-1 ratio bluffs to value bets. Turn, you're going to want a 1-to-1 ratio bluffs to value bets. And on the river, assuming you're using a pot size bet with a polarized range, you want a 1-to-2 bluffs to value bets. And that's going to keep you playing roughly a game theory optimal strategy. Obviously, it's not perfect, but that's going to be a good rough estimation. And you can use the range analyzer to very clearly determine those percentages so that you're able to play in a manner that's very difficult to exploit. A lot of people are very concerned with narrowing their opponent's range, but in reality, if you just play a strategy that's going to be difficult to exploit, whatever your opponents do wrong is going to fall into your plan, because they can't do anything about it, right? Is this versus a late position or a middle position player as well? I mean, it's similar enough. You're going to want to 3-bet less often as the initial raiser is from earlier positions, because when they're raising from earlier positions, they should have a stronger range, right? So you would not want to 3-bet quite as wide. Like 10-9 offsuit would be insane to 3-bet against middle position or early position raiser. And to be fair, if the player's in early position, you would not 3-bet nearly as often. Like ace-queen suited's probably going to be a call in those scenarios a lot of the time. And you're not going to 3-bet nearly as often just because your whole range should be significantly tighter. So don't think you can look at just one chart and know how to play every single situation. You want to think about the principles that come from these scenarios. So in general, when the opponent's range is wide, you have fold equity, right? Which means you get to 3-bet some pre-flop. If the opponent's range is tight, then you don't have fold equity, so you just don't get to 3-bet with very many bluffs. Let's see. When you say 3-bet for value, does that mean that you will get it all in with those hands? Correct. The 3-bet for value hands are typically 3-betting with the idea that they are getting all the money in. And we mentioned that like getting it all in with king-queen may seem a little bit loose, a little bit aggressive, but that is something you have to do if you want to be able to 3-bet with all these hands in green as well. If you want to, let's say, call with king-queen offsuit and ace-jack offsuit, what should you do? Well, you have to 3-bet with fewer bluffs. So if you could take out like jack-10 offsuit and 10-9 offsuit, that'd probably clear that up, would make it reasonable. You can maybe take out queen-10 offsuit as well. So if you wanted to call with ace-jack offsuit and king-queen offsuit, you should probably fold queen-10, jack-10, and 10-9 offsuit. So I think that would be pretty reasonable. How do you mix in each part, or how do you mix this strategy in a tournament? First off, you don't need to, right? In a tournament, you're very often playing against a player who you do not know, and you're only going to play against them for a short period of time. A few hours, or if you're there all day, 8 hours or 10 hours. Not a whole lot of time, right? So you really don't need to be concerned with the idea of I need to 3-bet with ace-king 78% of the time and call with it 22% of the time. You don't need to worry about that at all, especially if you're not playing just the absolute highest stakes against the best players on a very regular basis. Right? If you're playing against just a random player in a $500 buy-in tournament or a $3,500 buy-in tournament that has satellite qualifiers like a World Poker Tour event, You do not need to be concerned with the idea of mixing a strategy at all. That's going to drastically overcomplicate things and not add much to your equity. Very often, you just want to pick the best play with your hand, which is why I said earlier, if your opponents are particularly bad, well, then you don't need to 3-bet to the same size with your good hands and your bluffs. Because if they're going to call you every single time you 3-bet small and fold every single time you 3-bet big, you're just going to crush them. I remember I was at a final table of a World Series of Poker $5,000 buy-in event against tough opponents. And even then, they'd fold to the small blind. When small blind limped, I would make it 4.5 big blinds with my bluffs, and I'd make it 3 big blinds with my nut hands. Super face up, super exploitable. But you know what happened? The opponent folded every time I was bluffing and called every time I was value betting. And that's just because they don't have a big enough sample to figure this out. And if they don't have a big enough sample to figure it out, they're just going to play right into whatever you want them to do. So I don't think you have to be perfectly balanced in all these scenarios. Instead, you want to maximally exploit them if you can. That said, again, often you don't know what your opponents are going to do wrong. If your opponents are good, they are going to naturally be playing a fundamentally sound strategy, in which case you also need to start with a relatively sound strategy, right? So that's what we're doing here. If anyone has any more questions about these scenarios, let me know. I would definitely say that this image here is roughly my default in this scenario. Remember, this is when the cutoff raises to 2.5 big blinds. We're playing 50 big blinds deep, and I'm in the small blind. This is a strategy that's pretty tough to exploit. Like I said, if I was to make any adjustments to this, I would call ace jack and king queen offsuit, and probably fold queen 10 jack 10 and 10 9 offsuit. That is one adjustment that should probably be made against most players unless they are just very good, very loose, and very aggressive. But beyond that, this range is quite strong. Other additional hands you could 3-bet: king 8 suited, king 7 suited, jack 8 suited, 10 7 suited, 8 6 suited, 7 5 suited. You can certainly 3-bet those some portion of the time if you wanted to. This is pretty nice. And whenever you do 3-bet, very often if they make it 2.5 big blinds and you make it 9, they're either going to fold or they're going to go all in, right? And then you have a well-balanced calling range that's going to be able to call at roughly the minimum defense frequency and put your opponents in a bad spot. So this is a very, very nice strategy. And again, if your opponents are bad in usually a passive way, you can instead use a very wide calling strategy that will allow you to see lots of flops against 2 relatively weak players. So, let me know if this answers this question for you. What should you be doing pre-flop? Type, 1 in the chat box if you think this answers it, 2 if not. And if you type 2, ask questions, because I want to make sure you know how to play this situation where you are in the small blind against late position raisers. So let me know. That will be very beneficial. All 1 so far. Sometimes you're lucky. It's always very, very good. So I'm glad that we provided a little bit of information for you all here. Would it be okay if I share with all of you the current sale I have going on for my site, pokercoaching.com? Keep typing 1s if that's true. We have lots and lots of 1s. All right, well, all 1s. Fine. All right, so we are currently running a Valentine's Day sale. I know it's a little bit after Valentine's Day. Basically, we extended our New Year's sale to include Valentine's Day because it was a big success. Everyone signed up, and I say everyone, not everyone, almost everyone, and I wanted to give you all that opportunity too. So normally, pokercoaching.com is $39 a month, which, if you do some math, you'll see 3 years of it is $1,404. Kind of pricey, but I know that is too pricey for most people. So I wanted to give you all the opportunity to get it significantly cheaper. And as you see, here's what we are offering. We're offering 12 months for $199, 24 months for $249, or 36 months for $299. And you can get that at pokercoaching.com/New Year. My day aggro said, going to sign up in the next few days. Perfect. So you may all be asking, what is pokercoaching.com? Well, we have over 30 homework challenges just like this presentation, except for a lot of them deal with post-flop scenarios as well. And I know this was a relatively simple situation that we were just talking about pre-flop, but There are a lot of post-flop situations as well, and we go through them. And this was a relatively short webinar, but sometimes they take me 30 or 40 minutes to go through, and they take me quite a while to make, and they take a lot of the students a long time to make because it's hard, right? I'm trying to make sure that you become a very good poker player and know how to think about every scenario, because the idea of I need to know how to play my specific hand in this specific situation just does not work. You instead need to be thinking about how to play your whole range in every scenario. Also, in addition to all of these challenges like what we just did, there are over 400 interactive hand quizzes by myself, Alex Fitzgerald, and Matt Affleck, and I'm currently in talks with a few other coaches to have them making quizzes too. So that's exciting. And also, we're going to be adding new content all the time. I mean, like you see, we started with 0 homework challenges and 0 quizzes. Now we have 30 and 400 of them. The homework challenges are exactly that, a challenge. They are. Most people don't get them right, and sometimes I'm even reviewing them. I find little things I could even do better. Like today we discussed, right? If I was to play this scenario today, I would have instead, like I said, not 3-bet with ace-jack offsuit and king-queen offsuit. Would have played it a little bit differently. Does the site cover cash-in tournaments? It covers both, and we're actually actively looking for a few cash game coaches, and they'll probably be coming on in the very near future. So that's what poker coaching is. We also are including lots of bonuses worth up to $970. You can get up to 10 videos that are worth $97 each. If you sign up for 1 year, you get 2 free training videos worth $97 each. If you sign up for 2 years, you get 5 of these free videos. And if you sign up for 3 years, you get 10 of these videos. And these videos cover all sorts of topics. Basically, you get to pick whatever you want, right? If you're a cash game player, we have cash game courses, 4-hour-long webinars like this, but way longer, way more in depth. And they're by a lot of the best players in the world. I was fortunate enough to write a book, Excelling at No Limit Hold'em, with many of the best players in the world, and I learned a ton from them and recorded webinars with most of them. For example, we have one by Olivier Bousquet, one of the best players in the world, and he's discussing advanced six-handed strategies. We have some by Ed Miller discussing the information dominance in poker, where you want to make sure you have more information than your opponents and how to do that. Anyway, we have, I don't know, maybe 50 videos to choose from, and whenever you sign up, you get to pick the ones that apply most to you. And, if you do sign up, you can send me an email and say your situation. Say, I don't know, I'm a 1-2 no limit player. I get to play 3 hours a week, and I want to go from being a loser to a winner. Which video should I check out? And I'll tell you exactly which one to do, because I want to make sure that you get exactly the coaching that you need. I'm very fortunate in that I've been doing poker coaching for many, many years, and I've developed a gigantic library. This is very different than what a lot of people do, where they just present only one thing and, hopefully one size fits all. But, let's be real, one size does not fit all. We need to make sure we supplement the overall courses at pokercoaching.com with specific courses that benefit exactly you, because you are unique. So, here's a few questions. What if all you did was complete the training at pokercoaching.com and book one more winning session each month? What would that be worth to you? Well, let's say you do play 1-3, and let's say you win or lose $300 on a session. Let's say you end up making a big fold or a big call that wins or loses you $300. Well, that's worth the price of 3 years of pokercoaching.com, right? With this sale, because remember, let's go back. 3 years is only $2.99. So you get to pocket $1 for fun. You can tip the dealer $1, I guess. But if you that just saves you one big pot, or makes it to where you either don't lose the big pot or you win the big pot. Right there, you paid it all off for 3 years. One of our students, Louis Philippe, actually, just the other day said that he signed up for 3 more years, and in his first session he won something like $925. And he's one of our success story. Mr. Insane said free rolled 3 years with just 1 session in 2.5 hours. There you go. Exactly. Let's see. What if all you did was make a few less mistakes in your normal tournaments, allowing you to make one more final table? What would that be worth to you? What if you were able to go from a player who loses money to someone who slightly wins? Imagine you are losing money and making your significant other pissed at you and not having a good life and you go instead to winning, even just a little bit. I mean, that right there would change people's lives. And what I'm really going for is to try to take break-even players and make them significant winners, because then you start to really, really better the lives of people, because they can break out and have the opportunity to do whatever they want in life. That is what I am trying to do. I'm trying to better people's lives for forever, for as long as they are around and as long as they want to continue working hard. So to get this, go to pokercoaching.com/New Year. I know we're 2 months into the year, but it's still pretty much a new year. Get in there and get it. Also, if you don't like it, if you go and you sign up and you realize, okay, this is not for me, it's too much work, I don't want to work, I want to be presented simple things and have life easy, well, you're not going to be good at poker. But we'll give you a refund, right? If this is not for you, we will give you a complete refund within 30 days. Just let us know. Mayday Agger says, you've gone from being worthless to understanding most situations just from the limited trial. We're very good. I'm glad to hear that. Here's some testimonials. Don't take my word for it. Here we have 2 of my students who have posted pretty decent wins just in the last 2 months. Both of these players had these wins since the beginning of the year. We have DC Kid. Took first place in Event 13 in the Maryland State Poker Championship. Couldn't have done it without me, my books and my coaching, and a few lucky flops. And then also, just the other day, Thomas here won the Thunder Valley Poker Room World Series of Poker Circuit main event for $193,000. Thanking Assassinato, who is Alex Fitzgerald, one of my coaches, as well as Jonathan Little. So good job to him. Perhaps my best success story ever. This took place in December this year. Scarmaker, he won $1.3 million. Pretty good score. He was actually on the Joe Ingram podcast, and Joe Ingram said, is Doug Polk one of the main sources of content that you watch? And he said, yeah, I watch some of Doug Polk, but also Jonathan Little. I watch most content from him, his webinars, and his training videos, so that was pretty sweet. And very exciting. I don't think I've had a student win more than $1.3 million. I mean, that's more than I've ever won. My biggest win was only $1.1 million. So he's already beat me on that. And he got in this tournament for just $20, right? He studies a lot, works hard, gets engaged in poker, and now he's a millionaire. And I've actually been talking with him a lot. I'm preparing him for the World Series of Poker this year. And he has a very level head on his shoulders. He's one of the players who, well, he's going to take out almost all of this $1.3 million from the poker economy. And that money's just going to be gone because he's going to lock it up and make sure that he is set for life. So again, if you want this type of coaching, it is hard. It is hard work. Check out pokercoaching.com/New Year. So as promised, if you don't want to go sign up today, if you don't want to go there and get a completely free trial, you can also get the free ebook. These are my 2 best-selling ebooks. These are not long books. These are relatively short books that will give you very concise, practical, applicable tips to beat the small stakes games, which I know most of you are playing. I actually made these books because I was streaming on Twitch and realized, a lot of my advice is for medium stakes players who are already playing 2-5 and 5-10, and people needed a little bit more smaller stakes advice on Twitch because a lot of these players are new to poker or they're very recreational, and I decided to make these 2 books to help you. I remember for strategies for beating small stakes poker cash games, I actually went to Borgata and played 1-2 no limit for a week straight in my free time. I was also there for a World Poker Tour event. I won lots and lots of big blinds and learned a ton about the small stakes players, and I discuss all of that in that book. So make sure you go check that out. You can get that at pokercoaching.com/free gift. So now, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I see a lot of you have been typing in questions while I've been going. So let's go ahead and get to it. How much do you tip in cash games? You tend to tip $1 on any hand, no matter the size, and about 3% for tournaments. Well, first things first, does the tournament already take out a tip? Most tournaments take out 3%, a 3% tip. So if it's $1 million prize pool, they take out $30,000 the dealers get. It's a pretty good tip for them, right? So you definitely should not feel inclined to tip on top of that because it's already taken out. It's kind of like when you go to a restaurant. If they take 18% tip automatically, do you feel inclined to tip on top? Most people don't because they already took the tip. In cash games, $1 hand is certainly reasonable. If you're playing tiny stakes, I mean, $1 hand actually starts to become a lot because your win rate is going to be like $15 an hour. And if you win 5 pots and you tip out $5, well, you just gave away a third of your money, right? You should probably at least consider tipping a little bit more as the pots get bigger. But just make sure you don't go overboard because you have to realize every dollar you're giving away is a dollar out of you and your family's pocket. And it sounds rough, but whenever you are a small stakes poker player and you're trying to move up, your main concern should be moving up and progressing. You were mathematically challenged since childhood. You like the range charts, but how do you conquer equity? Practice and practice and practice and practice. I know it's not the right answer. I know that, or it's not a good answer. I know you don't like the idea that you have to get in there and work hard, and really it's just going to take you a lot more work than everyone else. Because really it's not that difficult. It's really just algebra, right? And find a tutor and study until you get it. Thank you for your commitment. Well, I appreciate that. Are the past homework challenges available to watch if you sign up for pokercoaching.com? Yes. So we have all those homework challenges available. If you sign up to pokercoaching.com using this code here, not only will you get a huge discounted price, lots of bonus content, but you'll also have access to all of the previous homework challenges. And like I said, I add a new one each week. Or every month. Sorry about that. When will my next book be out? The next book I've been working on, it's not actually my book, but the next book that's coming out is called Modern Poker Theory by Michael Acevedo. He is my go-to game theory expert, and I assumed he could write a good book, and turns out it's not just a good book. It may be the best book ever on poker. Brandon Adams, a world-class poker player and super genius, he has gone on Twitter and said that it's by far the best poker book. He had an early copy of it. And I'm finishing editing it. I'm trying to make it as easy as I can for everyone to consume because it's relatively difficult work. But that's what's coming out next, probably during the World Series of Poker. After that, we'll be excelling at online No Limit Hold'em. I'm working with the Pokar Backing Company to work with their group of world-class professional coaches to come up with lots and lots of additional topics that will help you master tough games. RK says, oh my God, algebra, you flunked that in grade school, now you're 65 years old. Yeah, got to get in there and you have to do it. It's required learning to play poker. You're having trouble defining tight aggressive players, loose aggressive players, etc., etc. What can you look out for? You want to look for how often people are doing specific things, right? And let's say someone folds their big blind to a raise 9 times in a row, and they never put a chip in the pot in general. Well, they're probably pretty tight, right? Say someone is raising every single time it folds them on the button or a late position. Well, they're probably kind of loose and probably kind of aggressive. Say the continuation bet the flop every single time. Probably a little bit too loose and too aggressive, right? So you want to look for how often they are doing either a very aggressive or very passive actions and then adjust, right? All you should also be looking for are which hands they are showing down, because if they're showing down a lot of garbage, especially from earlier positions, you know they're playing way too loosely. If they only show down premium hands, well then you know that too, right? So you want to look for things like that. Let's see. You've always struggled with the range analyzer. Is it possible to get a second video on how to do it? Well, I mean, we have an instructional document and a video on the range analyzer right here. There are instructions for use and video instructions, right? There's video instructions here on YouTube. And there's a whole long page on exactly how to use every single function of the range analyzer. So it's all there. If you have additional questions, email us at support@pokercoaching.com and we will try to answer your question. What's my opinion on the shot clock? It's great. I am a big fan of a shorter shot clock. I think something like 15 seconds per action is good with additional time extensions. I think that would be pretty nice, but I think it's great. What's my thought on the big blind ante-tournaments? I think those are good as well. They speed up the game. If you're a good player, you want to play as many hands as you can. And fortunately for us, most people think they're good at poker, so everyone wants to play more hands. Do you have any deals involving my inner circle coming up? We try to keep the inner circle exclusive because the inner circle, for those who don't know, you can check it out at pokercoaching.com/inner circle. Basically, we have 2 call-in sessions each month where you can call in and ask me questions, like whatever's giving you a problem, right? It's essentially private coaching. Each person gets roughly 15 or 20 minutes to call in and ask me their exact questions. And, clearly that is not scalable at all. It takes a lot of time. And for that reason, we try to keep it very exclusive. Also, we allow them to submit strategy session questions where they can ask me about anything, any in-depth topic, and I'll make them a 30-minute video on it that I present to the group. So it's even more, right? If you really want to take your game to the next level, you certainly should. Like Tom here. Tom here was a Inner Circle member, as far as I know. I remember he was at my at the World Series of Poker each year. I do a breakfast. Actually, Ken was there too. Both these players were at my breakfast this last summer at the World Series of Poker, and Tom's an Inner Circle member, and he studies a ton, and now he's won $193,000, right? That's what we were trying to do. We're trying to take players who are recreational players and make them into big, big winners, and that's what the Inner Circle does. It's just much more one-on-one private coaching interaction. Let's see. You have a tough time dealing with aggressive male players. Not sure what you're saying with this. If a player struggles remembering everything about the players at the table, which are the most important things to pay attention to? Well, first off, you don't need to remember everything. And also, you should certainly take notes. I have a video, jonathanlittlepoker.com/notes. Go there and check that out. We have, it basically explains how to keep track of what everyone is doing at the table. If they are playing aggressively, if they're playing passively, et cetera, et cetera. That way you can always look down and see if they are overly loose or overly aggressive. You can't remember that. Ideally, you just want to know, is this someone you need to be actively trying to exploit? And if it is, then what should you do about it? It's not just this player is bad, right? Because that doesn't tell you what to do. You want to know this player is playing poorly because they continuation bet too often. Because they continuation bet too often, I'm going to check raise them a lot on the flop with my garbage hands, and I'm going to check call a lot with my best hands, or something like that, right? You want to take the entire thought through the conclusion of what should I do to exploit them. If you're using the range analyzer and you have 10% value and 50% draws, as an example, you're unsure as to whether you should move more hands to value or more hands to junk. Probably you should take some of the draws and move them to the junk range, most likely. I definitely suggest Mayday Aggro. You go back and watch a few of the homework challenges because I always give suggestions on what people should do. And if you submit your next homework answer, I will definitely go through it. And if it's just completely off, I'll tell you what you need to do to fix it. If you're playing a spread limit game, which I have almost no experience in, should you be adjusting the ranges for 3-betting? You probably want to just be 3-betting more with a strong linear range because you're going to get called more often. When will my next webinar sale be? I mean, this is it. Here we are. We're doing it. If you sign up for, let's say you do go ahead and do the full 3 years, you get to get 10 of the past webinars that I've done. These bonus training videos, I want to be clear. These videos are roughly 4 hours long each that you're getting. That's 40 hours of content from myself and my handpicked group of pros who will essentially teach you everything you need to do to get really, really good at poker. All right, let's see what else you all are asking. If you're already Poker Coaching member, can you add 3 years onto your current subscription? Yes, you absolutely can. You absolutely can do that. You can certainly add 3 years. Just if you do that, say you're already a a yearly member, just send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com, to confirm that you signed up for 3 more years. Make sure you get your bonuses, and we will add that. Mayday Aggro says, Big Blind Ante is no different than regular ante. It's essentially the same. There are a few differences, though, and those mainly come into play when you're shallow stacked. For example, if you have 3 big blinds and you're under the gun, well, if you fold, now 1 big blind goes into the ante that you can't get back, right? Well, you can get it back, but you just put it all in it, so it's dead. So you just lose a third of your stack. That's really, really bad. And you want to make sure whenever you're shallow stacked, you're jamming way wider. And currently, no one has any sort of push-fold app for shallow stacks yet. I've been working with one of the guys who made the heads-up poker bot that beat all of the good pros. And he's having a hard time figuring it out, too, because you have to look at future game simulations, and you have to figure out what's going to likely happen in the future. Anyway, the gist of it is, as you get shorter and shorter, you want to be shoving a much wider range. What questions should you be asking me? Well, Matt, you want to be asking, you want to explain your situation in life. And if you don't know your situation in life, you need to figure that out, right? And you want to say, what can I do to better my life? What do I need to be studying? What do I need to be working on? And go from there. Seeger says, you added a few months ago. Now you're locked in until May 2020. Great. Can you learn all the terminology in your videos? Yes, it is not hard. I actually make a point to not use much terminology. And that's something I think that I do way better than most, because, listen, I'm not making videos to try to make myself feel smart. I'm trying to make videos to help all of you. I realize that I would not be where I am today if it was not due to the help of many people who came before me who were willing to help me. And I want to help all of you as well. Where can you find the magical 3-betting range that works in all spots against all players? Well, we actually teach that at pokercoaching.com. That said, there's not one magical range. There's a magical range for every scenario. Do I go through all the homework? Yes, absolutely. That is part of the value. I go through literally every answer that is submitted, as long as it is submitted in a reasonable format. Some people will just make me a wall of text, right? I mean, I make it clear you need to use the range analyzer. So it's not like I'm not going to sit there and read an essay. But at the same time, a normal homework answer will be 4 or 5 range charts explaining exactly what they're going to do. And that's great. How do you know when I've gone through your homework? We have a webinar every month. The Poker Coaching site includes one webinar where I go through my answer to the homework question, and then I go through it on the webinar with everyone. These webinars take a long time. They're like 4 or 5 hours, where I go through all of the answers. I mean, as we get more and more members, we're going to have more and more answers, but that's fine. I'm happy to do webinars all day for you all, because again, I want to make sure that I help you become a great poker player. And if you can ever not be in any of the webinars, that's fine. We send out a video recording of every single webinar we do. Dr. Mai says, you're always quite eager for the next homework webinar. I'm glad to hear that. Ronald said, 2-5, effective stacks $1,000. He raises $50 from the big blind with ace queen over 5 limpers. Cutoff limp re-raises to 130. He's loose, somewhat aggressive, plays 5-10. Kind of a weird, tiny re-raise, huh? You've not seen a limp re-raise and rarely done so before. I'm feeling like you'd be lost after the flop and you folded. Is that too nitty? Well, first you want to ask, if you're folding ace-queen, what are you actually calling with? It's going to be like, what? Jackson better and ace-king? So if you're raising much wider than that, you're probably folding way too often. That said, if you think your opponent's... You're essentially saying by folding that you think your opponent's never bluffing. So if you think your opponent's never bluffing, then you should fold. But you just told me the opponent's probably pretty good, so the opponent is going to be bluffing a lot. And they probably think you're just trying to steal all the limps. So they're just going to raise you and make you fold a lot. So I would say that's probably too nitty. I would definitely also suggest you make sure you're playing properly bankrolled. I have a long article called The Bankroll Bible at jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. Make sure you are properly bankrolled, because it sounds to me like you're probably afraid to lose your $1,000 stack. And if you're afraid to lose your stack, well, that's a big problem. Dr. Mize makes a very, very clear question. Would the cutoff really limp behind 2 or 3 players with a premium hand? Like literally aces, kings, or queens, or ace-king, because that's all you're worried about. And it seems pretty unlikely, right? He has to know, or he or she has to know that you are very, very aggressive and are going to be actively looking to try to take advantage of them. So seems a little bit nitty to me to fold. You struggle playing from the blinds. We have specific videos for that for current poker coaching subscribers. We have a lot of homework challenges discussing how to play from the small blind and the big blind. Because I know that's a scenario that gives a lot of people problems. Whenever you're in those spots, I mean, you're out of position. Being out of position is bad. You're out of position with a bad range. So it's different if you're under the gun because you have a really, really good range. But when you're out of position with a bad range, it's tough. And we discuss that very, very thoroughly because I know that that is a situation that comes up frequently that also gives everyone fits. So we discuss it. You say you've been very active from the blinds and it seems like he was lying in wait. Well, maybe. The problem is that when you fold, you just don't know, right? Whenever you just don't know, it leads to pretty bad spots. Be glad you're only at the blinds, you're bad at everything. Well, get in there and practice, right? You have to understand, whenever I first started playing poker, I was legitimately terrible. I was weak, I was tight, I was passive. My natural demeanor is not someone who is good at poker. And I had to learn. I had to learn that I had to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? I remember when I was teaching my dad to play, he was a small losing player. You know, he's doing his best. And then one day he decided, you know what? I'm tired of being a small losing player. I'm going to try to win. And what did he do? Well, there came a scenario where he had 20 big blinds. Someone raised, and he had, I think, Jack 10 offsuit, a spot where he would normally just fold or call. And he decided, I'm going to go all in like Jonathan told me to do. He did it. The opponent folded, and he's like, oh my God, I just won 4 or 5 big blinds with no showdown. That's amazing. He did that over and over again, and he won that tournament. The very first tournament after he decided to start listening to me, he won. And very often, my students do experience relatively quick success because their opponents think that they are maybe a little bit too weak, maybe a little bit too passive. But they learn the winning strategies, and then their opponents over-adjust. Their opponents assume they must be tight, they must be passive, and they're just picking up good hands. So if they're just picking up good hands, then I should fold, right? Let's see. You practice on sites like Club WPT where you get points. Is that helpful? I would tell you to, instead of paying them $20 a month, you should instead put $20 into a random online site and use that money to play real money games against players who are actually playing for real. Even if you don't get to cash that money out, that's fine. Right? I mean, understand, if when you're playing on the random American sites, they may decide to screw you. And if they do, well, understand you lost your $20 just like you would have lost your $20 on the other sites. I definitely suggest you play for actual real money. Have we done anything on Big Blind Ante yet? There's nothing really to do on Big Blind Ante because it's essentially the same thing unless you're very shallow. Let's see. What are some of my favorite webinars? I love the one with Olivier Bousquet. I learned a lot from that. We discussed advanced six-handed strategies using footage from the Global Poker League, where it's just basically a lot of the best players in the world playing against each other. I learned a lot about how he thinks about playing against other world-class pros, which was very enlightening. I like the webinar with Jared Tendler. I learned a lot about tilt and how to cure tilt, which I know plagues a lot of people. Let's see. Oh, I like the webinar with Phil Hellmuth, where he goes through a lot of hands that he played when he won his World Series of Poker Europe bracelets. And Phil's strategy is unique, to say the least. So check out those. I also have a lot of videos myself there. There's one where I final tabled the Sunday 500. It was every tournament, or they used to have a big $500 tournament every week on PokerStars, and I final tabled it. Then I immediately got it in with, I think, queens against ace queen and lost. But I was at the final table second in chips, and that was great, right? Let's see. You had the same revelation yesterday. I'm not sure what revelation you're referring to. You need to improve on odds and implied odds as well. For that, I definitely suggest you check out my book, Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. Give me a second. I'm looking at this green book here to see if I discuss odds. I don't think I actually discuss odds in this book. because this book is mainly just a guide on how to exploit the very bad players. But yeah, check out a book, Mastering Small Stakes No Limit Hold'em. You can find it at jonathanlittlepoker.com/mastering. Here, I'll type in a URL real quick. Let's see. There it is. That should take you to an Amazon page if you want it. All right, so I think that's going to be it for today. I want to thank you all for being here with me. Thank you for bearing with the technical difficulties. I know that computers don't always work, so we'll figure that out before next time. Again, make sure you go claim your free gift. You can get one of these 2 books, whichever type of game you play mostly. You can get it at pokercoaching.com/free gift. And also, make sure, if you want to take your game to the next level and achieve the success that my other students have, go to pokercoaching.com/New Year. We have a course laid out for you that will make you learn to think about poker like a professional. You just have to, right? If you go through everything we have there, you will learn to think like a pro. And once you start thinking like a pro, you start playing like a pro. And once you start playing like a pro, you start having results like a pro. And that's what I want for all of you. And I'm glad to see that my students are starting to achieve that. And again, it has a 30-day money-back guarantee. So even if you don't like it for whatever reason, if it's too much work for you, you didn't realize you had to study so much to be good at poker, well, that's okay. Davery says, the revelation, that you had to follow my advice on ranges with raising and not limping and 3-betting instead of calling. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are loose and passive. They call a lot, they limp a lot, they just want to see flops. Everyone who wants to see a flop, don't let them see a flop and steal all their money. It's an easy way to drastically increase your win rate. And, Nightmare, or Night Mage, if you are tired of breaking even, you're tired of losing, give poker coaching a try. I am very sure it's going to give you a humongous edge on your opponents, which will make it difficult for you not to at least break even. And, really, you'll probably thrive. So check it out. Do the work. Devote to yourself that this new year, you are going to change your life by significantly better your pokering skills. And you can do it at pokercoaching.com. Again, get it at pokercoaching.com/New Year. Thanks a lot. Have a great night. Good luck in your games, and I will talk to you all next time.